Hello, everybody. My name's Ben. I'm a senior in urban studies here at Brown. And today I just wanted to discuss the idea of the ethics of prison labor as they relate to climate-related disasters. So to start, I just want to start with an image. So imagine the scene of wildfires raging across drought-stricken California. They're barely contained. In one of the fires alone, 29 people have died and another 200 are unaccounted for. And we know that it's not the worst it will get because rising temperatures and sustained drought will foster increased frequency and severity of wildfires in the next century. And we know that climate change is getting worse, and so are the disasters that are going to come with it. But that said, debating the long-term consequences of climate change really is a luxury because there are people facing these disasters as we speak. And these disasters demand responses that acknowledge the lives and livelihoods of people at stake. And so we are forced to respond to them. And so tens of thousands of firefighters are dispatched to control these fires, to save people and property. And among them on the front lines are incarcerated people, incarcerated firefighters who are paid $2 a day plus $1 for every hour that they're actively fighting fires. So imagine a news camera comes by to cover the blaze, and they interview an incarcerated firefighter in an orange jumpsuit, and they say that it's hard work and it's really dangerous, but they feel like they're making a difference. And another says that the pay isn't great, but he did it to reduce time on his sentence so he could get back to his family. And another says that anything is better than sitting in his cell. So let's zoom out and think about the context that this is happening in. We have the California Corrections Office sending out a tweet that's touting the vital role that these incarcerated firefighters are playing in controlling wildfires. And the state of California sells the program as a success for rehabilitation at the same time that they capitalize on low-wage labor. And afterwards, these trained, vetted, and poorly compensated incarcerated firefighters, 6 of whom have died since the program's conception, cannot find employment in fire departments after they're released. So as climate change drives environmental disaster alongside a growing prison population, I think we need to ask, what are the ethics of prison labor? And does climate change affect what is ethical? Because as of now, I think we have allowed it to do so. And does the way that we construct disasters affect the ethics of prison labor? And I think that this last question is important because if we construct disasters as natural and inevitable and uncontrollable, and we highlight the lack of resources that we have to respond to them, then prison labor becomes an economic tool to help deal with an uncontrollable and worsening problem. And we become helpless and frantic. And though I don't deny the urgency of disaster and of climate change, this mentality kind of changes ethics to let anything go. And it makes these responses seem like a necessity, like they are inevitable, like disasters. So without social or cultural responsibility attached to these disasters, it allows programs like these to be framed as a success for rehabilitation and for the state. It makes it seem like a win-win. But in reality, that's not the case, because if we destruct disasters as natural, singular events, we take human agency and responsibility out of the equation. And disasters really are processes, and they represent cumulative vulnerabilities over time and space, which mix with environmental hazards to create disastrous events. And the places with built-up vulnerabilities are generally those without resources. And though it's true that fires may burn million-dollar houses as well as like a trailer park, some can rebuild or move away, some can hire private firefighters, while others are stuck in place without resources or public support. So instead, by framing disasters as cumulative vulnerabilities and hazards that are unequally distributed over space, makes them anything but natural. And considering the socioeconomic and environmental conditions at play that increase vulnerabilities, we can draw a parallel to the prison industrial complex. We have increasing disasters alongside an increasing prison population, and incarcerated firefighters save the state of California $90 to $100 million in disaster response a year. So there's an incentive to incarcerate more people if they can be used for cheap labor, and as we know, the processes of mass incarceration are dog whistles to race and class. So in this light, we have a scenario where the victims of state violence are the same people picking up the slack the state is creating in its disaster response, and they're barely being rewarded for it. We have a direct link between disaster management and the prison industrial complex, which are two systems that are both inherently social and economic that operate under the guise that they're natural. So the only way the system is justifiable is if we're relying on falsehoods, that disasters are natural, and that a lack of resources justifies exploitation. And I think it's an important question to ask if there's a more ethical way, and I think perhaps there is. I think it's important to explore that because so many incarcerated firefighters, at least the ones that the media highlights, do express satisfaction with their job, and they feel like they're making a positive difference. And maybe paying a living wage, maybe facilitating some sort of reentry program that allows them to get jobs upon release, this conversation would be different. But I think ultimately that idea is superficial when you think about the systems at play. And I think really we have to reframe our conceptions of disasters, of incarcerated people, of the prison industrial complex, and work against the systems that perpetuate socio-environmental vulnerability and incentivize incarceration to ensure that disaster response is ethical moving forward. So yeah, thank you.